traditional marketing really sees a stakeholder as potentially just a customer, or as they might be defined, audiences or personas. But in many ways, if we view these through a responsible marketing lens and really consider stakeholders as everybody who potentially could partner with us to create value, then we might be able to see something very different and maybe open up new opportunities for our organizations. Ethical and sustainable organizations and their marketing are going to need to balance both brand goals with stakeholder well-being. This is something that we've covered many, many times in a whole range of different webinars here at the college and then through many of the courses that we're running. We're seeing this now as becoming almost a currency through which we develop our marketing, our communications, and our products and services. The ethics and the honesty around how we do business is becoming a really key thing that all our stakeholders are using to critique how well we're doing. And that's becoming really, really important. We're seeing many, many examples. A lot of organizations now going after things like B Corp certification to give that kind of stamp of approval that, hey, we're trying to do this stuff. We're on a journey. We're not perfect, but we're actually trying to create something that enables us to just do better and better every day. So the old style, old school form of marketing, which was very much about just creating consumer demand, selling to that demand and making money, feels very outdated now. And so what we're looking for here is a more responsible, ethical way of doing business. There are many, many quotes, many, many thought leaders now really attending to this. And well, there's a really good one from Simon Manring who talks about, in a world of transparency, you don't get to decide what your brand stands for, your stakeholders do. And this is really about taking, as many of us have kind of hoped that we were doing in the past, the customer or the stakeholder's view and looking back in on our organizations and saying, really truthfully and honestly, are we doing everything we can to be ethical and responsible and sustainable? And the answer often, when we really are truthful and honest, is, well, there's gaps or not really. And so this whole idea of putting stakeholders first, genuinely, if you decide to do it, opens up a whole range of different opportunities for you. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be looking at this through the PESTEL framework. That is the macro analysis framework. So PESTEL, or PESTEL, however you wish to define it, talks about the political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal or regulatory factors that come into affecting your world as a business or as a marketer looking to represent a brand. And this format, or this framework, enables marketers to analyze the big forces, those macro influences that are shaping our plans and our strategies. So a responsible macro analysis here, so a responsible PESTEL framework, will integrate sustainability into the mix, ethics, stakeholder interests, and really more authentic decision making, so that we're not just about creating profit. We're not just about measuring success in the dollar signs or the pound signs, but actually a more holistic approach, considering all stakeholders and the value that we're bringing to them. So some actionable steps that you can take, because obviously it's all very well talking about this stuff, but actually what we want to do is actually make this stuff actionable and practical, is maybe start to have conversations in your teams and in your organizations, shifting from a profit-driven to an impact-driven stakeholder engagement. So just stop and reflect and think about that just for a minute. Stakeholder engagement, so that is communication, interaction, relationship building with all of your stakeholders, but not just purely from a profit driven, in other words, how much money can we kind of squeeze out of them, but much more to an impact driven approach. And we'll explore how we can do that collaboratively with them to create more value on both sides of that relationship as we go through this. And of course, then PESTEL can be used to identify any risks or challenges that are coming through from the big wide world that will impact us, but also opportunities in this conversation, because a lot of this stuff for many of us is going to be quite different to how we've done it before. So let's go through each of these PESTEL elements of the macro framework. Let's go through these one by one. So we're going to start with political, because often this is the biggest of the big pictures. So brands and the politics within a sector, within a country, has an inherent kind of level of responsibility. You know, we are all responsible. This is not about saying, oh, well, it's my management team, or oh, it's the decision makers. We are all individually responsible for taking this back into our organizations and having these conversations. Customers and consumers, B2B and B2C, expect brands now to take a stand on political and social issues. No longer is it acceptable as a marketer to say, well, it doesn't really impact us, so we're going to just look the other way. We need to have a very clear position on all of the things that are happening from a more macro sense. So as you see things in the news, or you see things in the media, conversations are happening at a kind of a geographically national level even, then you need to have a view on this stuff, because it will eventually seep down to our local level and it will impact us. So staying in touch is really, really important. There's a great quote there: silence is complicity in today's market. In other words, if you turn away, you've made a conscious effort to turn away. If you decide to do nothing and not listen, that was also a conscious decision, because with AI and all these kind of research tools to hand, there is no excuse. There's nowhere to hide anymore. So the idea really is to align your thinking, your planning, your strategies, and your campaigns and tactical plans with your corporate social responsibility, your CSR policies. Now, if you don't know what those are, it's well worth asking the management team, or it's well worth asking your business owner if you're in a smaller business. What are our social responsibility viewpoints? What kind of statements can we put out there that say, this is what we stand for, and when this happens, we're going to call that out. When we are doing business, we're doing the right kind of business. We're an ethical, responsible business. We don't do business with those kinds of firms, or we don't support that kind of initiative. So that you're very clear, not judging you. It's not saying that you can say this and you can't say that, or this is right or this is wrong, but it's about having really, really conscious positions on some of these really important issues. And potentially, it is also about partnering with ethical advocacy groups or other organizations to support causes and to support a position really authentically. So aligning yourself and your brand and your business with things that just align with the right kind of other organizations. And again, like attracts like. We're seeing other stakeholders then coming into the mix because you're saying and doing the right things. So this is about being really awake and aware. And a lot of this stuff is becoming quite mainstream. There was the Nike campaign a couple of years ago, which was boycotted, or people were boycotting Nike because of the position that Colin Kaepernick took, but boosted brand loyalty amongst others who were more socially aware about actually what was going on. So at times you are not going to be able to appeal. And it is this kind of feeling that we can't appeal to everybody. But if you take these social positions, you take this kind of stance, and you support things that are authentic and in line with your brand position, you will start to attract more people who identify with those positions. And maybe this is time to let go of those who were a little bit more generic, or kind of against the direction or the journey that you're on. But developing an ISK-RISU assessment is really, really important before you take a stance. Think about the impacts that, okay, if we identify with this particular cause, or this particular group, or this particular charity, or this particular thing that's coming through, if we identify with it, if we start to kind of build it into our marketing communications, what are the potential risks of doing that? So not to do it with fear, but just to do it with an understanding that if we change something, everything will change. We call it the domino effect. Can you imagine if you suddenly turn your whole brand through 90 degrees and become something very different? Well, clearly that will have an impact, but it might be a good impact. Doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, could be a really positive thing. but ensuring that any kind of political style messaging aligns with your core business values is really important. You need to be able to talk an authentic story. This is not about jumping onto a political bandwagon just because you think you can look good, or just because you think piggybacking onto this is going to get some views or going to get some likes or just going to get some coverage. That is not authentic, responsible marketing. It's about making sure that there's true alignment with any cause or charity or thing that you're looking to align with, has to be in line with your business values. The second one is pricing. So this is another one here that can kind of come into this. It will kind of fall into this kind of category that from an economic perspective, ethical pricing is something you do really need to consider. We're seeing a lot of kind of shifts towards things like fair trade in the generic sense, not just the brand, but in a generic sense. And because our customers are now looking at how we do business, they're looking along our supply chain, our organizations that we might deal with in a business to business sense are looking at, are we doing ethical sourcing? Is our pricing transparent? Are we paying fair wages? All of this stuff is coming into play when we look at ourselves and actually critique how we are doing. And again, it's not about just words, it's about action. A lot of organizations now are building, really strong brand and credentials, if you like, around actually doing good, wholesome business. Tony's Chocolonely was a good one, which was building a profitable business model on eliminating child labor from the chocolate supply chain, which was something a couple of years ago that was very, very much in the news. You probably saw this. It was, again, following hot on the heels of the fashion industry, who have been, slated for many, many years about, unethical supply chains and everything being based on just low cost supply. Well, now we're getting wise to this. And because of the availability of information, that again, there is nowhere to hide, and nor should there be. So adopting transparent pricing models, looking at the breakdown of our cost models, looking at where we source our products or our widgets from as businesses is really, really important. This isn't just about getting our own house in order. This is looking at everybody, every stakeholder around our organization and saying, are our agencies working in line with our values? Are our suppliers kind of the same businesses like us? Do they share a common purpose and a common journey? And then maybe, if it's appropriate at the appropriate time, using some kind of certification to validate these commitments. And if you can go after something like B Corp or equivalent, many, many other certifications are available, then it gives you that kind of credibility to say, we're not only saying we're doing it, but here are the actions to prove that we're actually doing it. And these are things that you can build into your marketing strategies. Do not be shy that if you're doing good work in this field and you've got the evidence to back it up, as I was mentioning there, then you can use this in your marketing. Don't be shy and sort of humble with this. This is something that is actually really important. It can build into your marketing campaigns. Again, have to be evidence-based, but it can also gain a lot of traction and build momentum internally within the organization and with your suppliers, because people like good news stories. Good news stories are no longer about the features and benefits of your products. They're far deeper, far more intrinsic in who you stand for, who actually are you, what is your purpose as a brand or as an organization. And we see this come through in many different examples. If you keep an eye on the marketing press and the marketing media, you'll see a lot of great examples. One that came through was MasterCard's True Name campaign, which enabled transgender customers to choose their names on credit cards, for example, and not just having this kind of male-female, Mr. or Mrs. Kind of prefix on your actual name on your card. Little actions which can have significant impact because they're meaningful to stakeholders. So actionable steps really for this would be to think deeply about your stakeholders. Who are they? Where are they? What do they stand for? What are their values? What are the journeys that they're on? And how can you authentically and responsibly align with those things, those challenges, those pain points that maybe they're feeling? How can you align your brand authentically, not piggybacking on, remember, this isn't something you think, oh, look, there's an opportunity and you just jump in. You've got to be able to back this up with, no, we're really in this properly. This is authentic conversation. This is real, and we can show that it's real. And then you'll get that loyalty, the loyalty that will come through building the relationships in that way with them. So it's really, really exciting stuff here. And of course, from a social perspective, stakeholders and marketing responsibility comes hand in hand with a social position. And of course, this is all about this word that we're all focusing on now, which is inclusivity. So inclusive marketing and representation really comes to the fore here. I mean, a lovely example, which I often kind of find myself sort of seeing when I kind of, I'm really sort of drawn to this particular one for some reason. But Rihanna's Fenty beauty range revolutionized beauty marketing with 40, well, it was over 40 foundation shades for diverse skin tones. And that was a really interesting approach. And many other brands now, both in fashion and in cosmetics and in the beauty industry, are going down these routes because once one brand kind of sets a new bar for inclusivity, then everybody has to follow because you're left behind otherwise. And this may well already be happening in your industry. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you'll be very different in a sector or in an industry to the next person sat next to you virtually in this session. And we're all seeing it coming through in every different industry, every different product and service style. We're seeing these changes and this evolution. So we have to stay awake to it. This is not something for next year. It's happening right now. So think again about your stakeholders and your customers. Are you being inclusive? Do you have brand visuals and messaging that is away from unconscious bias? Or are you just doing it because the AI has just created that image for you? Or because, well, we've always done this kind of imagery? Are you now actually involving diverse voices in the creation of your decision making, in the creation of the assets that you use in your marketing? And it isn't just about going all in on only diversity, because of course you have probably a core audience who may or may not be in that sector, but it's about a deep understanding of who are we serving, who are we aligning with. The social inclusivity is such an important consideration now, and balancing your audience with what they then see and how they then perceive you. It's a sensitive issue, it's a fine balance, but it is so, so important. Get it right, and your stakeholders expecting authenticity will see a real positive relationship building. This will influence your communities. This will influence the value that you're bringing and the perceptions that these people have with the communities that you're serving. And so you're going to see maybe a different alignment with different audiences, maybe even different influencers if you have influencer marketing in the mix of things that you do. If you're focused on a particular thought leadership topic, there will be people who will rise to the surface and actually shout you out in a positive way. And they'll say, hey, these are the good guys. And then you'll be seeing alignment with maybe different communities that you can then serve with different value. And of course, this means you're really investing in a lot of different ways of going to market. We call this grassroots marketing, and it can actually happen at a very micro level, can be almost be like a real niche offer as you test out this new way of going to market. But this will generate genuine audience connection because it's meaningful, it's appropriate, it's inclusive, it actually brings new people into the mix. And of course, then from a competitive or financial benefit, you can say, well, okay, if these are new stakeholders or new customers who we've never served before, these are new relationships, we're giving value, we're getting value back. So these could be financially good decisions as well as ethical and responsible decisions that are just the right thing to do. So there is a win-win going on here. It's really interesting when you start to build this into your strategies and into your tactics because there's a big, big set of reasons here for doing this. It isn't just about doing the right thing. It's actually a commercially beneficial thing to do as well. And so for those of you in organizations or in cultures where it's like, oh, well, that doesn't really apply to us, or well, we've always done it this way. And believe you me, I do hear this from prospects and potential clients that I work with, where they're just cynical. They don't believe that this applies to us. It always applies to the other businesses, of course, but not to us. We don't need to worry about that. I still hear this. But organizations who really embrace this are the ones then who get ahead of them. And of course, we know that they're the ones who will succeed in the long term. And then when you start to think a little bit more about the technology P that comes into the mix, then this is something that is coming through loud and clear with all the emerging technologies that are here to help us manage our data, the data holding, the technologies and platforms that we're using, the security and privacy concerns that both our customers, but also that we as business owners, business leaders, or marketers have. We need to be doing ethical business here. Stakeholder relationships are based on trust. So we do need to think about technology here. The future of digital marketing is permission-based, not surveillance-based, said Tim Cook, CEO of Apple. And of course, that really gets us kind of thinking and reminding that this is a transactional world that we live in. People are transacting with us on the basis of data. So for us to be able to do tactical campaigns and send emails and the like, we need to be transacting data. We need their email addresses and their contact information. So it is a permission-based world. If we can't get that because we're not acting responsibly or ethically or giving almost a feeling of trust and faith in our customer or our stakeholders' eyes, then they will not give us that data and they'll go next door to our competitor who is saying and sharing the right stories and the right things. So it's really important that we build in data ethics and privacy first into our marketing. So if this is not part of your regular monthly meetings, it really should be. As you talk to colleagues, as you talk to your management team about doing good, ethical, responsible marketing, data and privacy has to be in that conversation. You know, it's not the sexy end of marketing. It's not that kind of creative buzz that you get from doing a really exciting campaign or producing lots of great content or creative, but it is the bedrock of solid, responsible marketing. Data ethics and privacy is so important. And as we move and see this shift from third-party data, third-party tracking and cookies that we've seen in our advertising through social media and through Google and stuff in the past, we're moving to first-party data. That's where we have the responsibility to hold the data ourselves. The lens is focused on us. The focus is going to be on us as marketers to say, okay, we can show evidence that we're holding this data authentically and honestly. You are safe with us, customer. You're safe with us, stakeholder. And we will be communicating our privacy and our security policies clearly and very, very simply, and showing that we're putting your data at the top of the tree of things that we do in terms of priority. If you don't do that and you keep it there in the small print, you are going to be losing a competitive edge because your customers want to know that they're safe with you. It's really, really important to have in the whole mix of things that you're doing. And then when you start to get into using things like AI, et cetera, you then are training yourself really as a business, as a brand, as a marketer to be ethical, unbiased, and human-centric. A lot of us are now using, as we would, AI to help streamline our activities and create campaigns and automate what we're doing, get super, super efficient. And by doing that, what we potentially are doing is introducing bias, unethical traction in the work that we're doing, and maybe moving away from a human-centric stakeholder approach into something more technology-driven. Well, I'm not judging. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do, but we need to be super careful that we're not adding bias in based on the training that we do of our algorithms in the AIs that we're using. So as we brief our AIs, as we brief the likes of ChatGPT, making sure that we don't introduce bias into those conversations, into those prompts that we're putting into the AIs to help us do our work. So being really, really authentic in the way that we use AI. LinkedIn adjusted its hiring algorithm after discovering it favored male candidates over women. That was one of the things that came through a few months back that really highlighted that even big organizations who are very, very data centric, they are absolutely all about the data holding. They realized that actually they were getting it wrong because there was an inherent bias driven by the way that they had been prompting the systems they were using. So the actionable steps here are really to regularly audit any kind of AI marketing tools that you have for bias. Build that into your strategies and into your plans. Make sure that you are integrating bias into all of your thinking. Just kind of critique the next social post that you put out. Look at the next blog that you write. You look at the output from the AI conversation that you had the next time you do it, and just see if you can identify any form of bias, either against the stakeholders that you're serving right now or any that you would be looking to work with in the future. Be on the guard, be on the hunt really for bias in everything that you do. It will be there. It is an intrinsic thing that comes through just because we are human. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to say, oh no, I'm not a marketer anymore, or oh no, we need to shut down our business because we've got bias. Bias is a human-centric thing, but it is something that we can control, and it's something we can be very, very aware of. And that's the point. Continuous improvement, removing as much bias as you can, but don't beat yourself up if you're imperfect, because that is just the nature of the systems and the nature of being human. We are trained and we're designed and have been for millennia to be biased. It's kind of how we operate, but actually doing it in a responsible, ethical way is the key here. And a lot of this, of course, is, as we've already seen, going to play out not only socially, but also environmentally. So as we go through this kind of integration of stakeholders into our marketing thinking and building more responsible brands and marketing campaigns and strategies, we do need to build credible sustainability claims within the work that we do. A lot of brands now are sharing, as they should, the storytelling around how they're becoming more environmentally friendly. Your carbon footprint, of course, is a new currency that we're kind of trading with now. But if you get this wrong, if you don't use evidence as the basis for the claims that you're making, you will be called out. H&M's Conscious collection, as an example, was called out for vague sustainability claims, and that led to regulatory scrutiny. The eyes will be on you, and believe me, they will be on you if you get called out. And again, it's not great for PR if it all falls apart, but if you do things in a really responsible, transparent, and honest way, again, we're not looking for perfection, but what we're looking for is an honest journey storytelling along the timeline that you have. And of course, using third-party certification, the B Corp that I've been talking about, maybe signing up with something like the Anti-Greenwash Charter, showing that you are, with best endeavors, trying your best. It is very, very unlikely you're going to get called out. It's very unlikely that you're going to get any bad press if you are showing best endeavors. I would challenge you to show me an example where somebody has been called out if they've been open and honest. Your customer, your stakeholders are not looking for perfection. I know I keep saying this, but it's so important. What they're looking for is an honesty in your endeavors and the plans and the strategies that you have. And lots of organizations have been trading on this for many, many years. Great example, or a lot of the green initiatives that M&S have been doing over many, many years. And it's really now part and parcel of a lot of the brand work that they do. And do they get shouted out? No. Do they get called out for vague claims? No, because it's all evidence-based. And so the things that we can do is really start at a very kind of small local level. As I'm saying, you don't have to be seeking perfection before you talk about this. If you can make a shift towards biodegradable or refillable packaging, for example, if you can offer incentives for eco-conscious, customer behaviors, if you can get this to kind of play out right the way through your value chain, so your suppliers and your resellers, your retailers, depending on what kind of organization you have, if those actionable steps show that everybody around you, as well as you, are taking positive action and trying to drive this forward, it can be hugely positive. And this is what your customers are looking to hear. It's a really important way to move this thing forward. And from a kind of a greenwashing perspective, which is obviously the thing that we don't want, is really sort of tightening up your understanding of what the guidelines are. There's a lot of opportunity here for kind of looking at the ASA's guidelines in terms of advertising, keeping up to date with GDPR regulations, etc., etc., knowing what is going on within your industry. There will be guidelines if you have an industry association or body who kind of, reporting on this kind of thing, taking responsibility for an understanding of who is saying what the kind of standards are, where the benchmarks are right now, and also who's doing good practice. It might be you, but it might be somebody else in your industry. Knowing who's doing what from a legal or regulatory perspective is really, really important. And of course, you've got your trusted friend, ChatGPT or Perplexity, to do some of this background research for you. So keep almost a diary note, a little reminder that says, I need to look this stuff up occasionally. And it's not a daily activity, of course it isn't, but something that you could maybe do once every couple of weeks or once every month. Just a little look, a little search to see who's doing what opportunities are out there. Has the bar been raised by others in my industry or more generally? What can I learn from these activities? And these will be things that can then really bring some kind of real credibility into the thinking and the planning and the strategy that you do. And conducting lots of kind of audits on both the organizations that are supplying you or further downstream in your supply chain can also be a really good sort of starting point for really understanding what's going on. And if you're not part of those broader value or supply chains, as we would call them, think about any kind of third parties, agencies or consultants that you use. If you're a marketer or content creator and you use third parties to support you in the work that you do, what are their positions on all these things? How responsible are they? Actually doing an audit on them and having that conversation may well, hopefully, bring things to light that maybe they would be looking to come on a journey too. Collaboration with stakeholders, for stakeholders is key. And many of the brands that have really taken a really great lead in this, brands like IKEA, Lego, HSBC, Microsoft are doing a lot of great stuff in many of these different areas. I've just given a few little examples there of some of the stuff that's going on here. Finding your own niche here is key. I mean, I've covered here through going through this macro kind of analysis, if you like, the PESTEL angle, the PESTEL framework, uncovering things from so many different angles here to build a marketing responsibility position. It means that you're kind of looking in so many different directions. It really is a 360-degree review of sustainability and social responsibility and stakeholder inclusivity and all these kind of phrases. But as you look around through all of these different angles that you can take, one of the things I'd really encourage you to do would be to maybe choose one. Start with one. If this isn't something that is really built into your brand already, where you've already got plans and strategies in place, then maybe just take one angle. Which one of those do you feel more aligned with? Which one do you feel would be more in flow with the kinds of activities or the kind of culture that you have as an organization? Or if you know it, the higher purpose, the reason for being that your organization has. Which one kind of feels more intuitively aligned with what you do? Are there any there that kind of just jump out at you and you think, that could be something worth exploring? Because otherwise, this is a very complex area. It's very broad, it's very deep, there's so much to it. So starting small and scaling up and out is generally the best way of doing things. So the key takeaways really from this, before we go into a little kind of action plan step by step to round this talk off, the key takeaways really are that ethical marketing will define the brands that last. I think we all know that. I think, we've seen enough and heard enough, both in this talk, but more generally, that kind of it's been around for a while now. And we can see that brands like some of those big names that I just mentioned there, plus others who have really put this at the center of everything they do, They're now trading on something so much more than just purely product sales or delivering service. They stand for more. They're providing this kind of trade in value to and from their stakeholders. So they're working with ethics and they're working with a higher kind of moral positioning, I guess, giving back so much to social, so much to environment, and so much to community. Stakeholder capitalism is the new standard for this kind of sustainable business growth. Your stakeholders are going to want to be co-creating value with you. It isn't just about you selling them stuff. They want to be part of that conversation about how you're going to bring value to their world, how you're going to, solve their pain points, how you're going to help them get over their challenges. So this is a two-way conversation. It isn't just a one-way thing that happens when you happen to want to sell them something. This is an onboarding of a new way of thinking. It's exciting, it's challenging, but it really is sustainable. So Richard Branson said, the brands that will thrive in the coming years are the ones that have a purpose beyond profit. So one of our richest, sort of Englishmen in the UK here is saying that actually it is about purpose. It's not about profit. And you could say, well, it's all very well for him to say, but he's so true in the way and the stance that, these business leaders are kind of now repositioning how we define success. It is so important to think of it over and beyond just financial success. We're not saying that it isn't profitable, and we're not saying that profit and sales aren't important. Of course they are. But the ones that will thrive in the coming years are the ones that have a purpose beyond profit. So, profit there, yes, we've got to pay our bills, but something that is more valuable beyond that profit. We don't just stop at profit, we look at our stakeholders and then market responsibly beyond that. So here's a little 5-step action plan for you if you want to kind of take this thing forward. Here's some things that you can do to hopefully, with your colleagues, with your teams, with your people in your organization, start these conversations if you already haven't. So map your stakeholders and prioritize some ethical engagement with them. So map out who your stakeholders are. We call it stakeholder mapping. Yes, it does what it says on the tin. But then, having mapped them out, the most prioritized ones that you can see, start to have conversations with them, start to really truly listen to what they really value in what you do and how could you become more responsible together with them. Align your marketing strategy with this new style of PESTEL framework and keep an eye on what is coming, because all the things that I've just covered with you in this talk, they will change. This time tomorrow, it could be very, very different. There'll be new things, new examples coming through both as challenges, but also as opportunities. So it's exciting, but it's a little bit daunting at the same time. So that's why I'm saying is start small and start to build out. Maybe choose one of those 6, PESTEL or R, and decide which one you're going to focus on to align with your existing marketing strategy so you can build responsibility into your conversations. Commit in everything you do to transparency, to fairness, and to inclusivity. I asked you to do a little audit there just to kind of see where you're producing stuff right now. And it is at a very local level. Start to challenge some of your colleagues or your agencies with, okay, here's my little challenge for the week. Can we be more transparent, fair, and inclusive in what we're going to produce this week? And see the before and after difference. You may already be doing this really well, in which case you can celebrate, but there could be and probably will be rooms for improvement. So play with that and see what comes through. Regularly audit marketing ethics and sustainability impact. I've been talking all the way through this about the journey. And if you've listened to any of my webinars before, you'll know that this is all about me saying it's about the timeline. It's about monitoring and measuring and providing evidence of the journey that you're on. So by doing this and measuring the impact step by step by step, not waiting until it's 80, 90 or 100% done, but actually monitoring it and measuring it and celebrating the success on the journey. Every little step in the right direction is something you can celebrate. So there's a real upside to that, and you can start today and you can measure the impact today and you can then use that today. This is not something you wait for to do next year. You can begin small today, and that's really interesting. And innovating for long-term stakeholder value, not just short-term gains, is key. And when I talk about strategy and tactics, the kind of today gains, that's the here and now. But as you do this, you're starting to build a new brand position for the future. This is innovation for long-term value. So maybe as you start to have these conversations about what could we do today? We've audited this, we've seen this opportunity, we've seen this little moment to be able to do something differently today. Where is that taking us? And then maybe once a quarter, for example, having those more strategic conversations about, hey, we're a different organization now. Look where we've come from and look where we now are. What does that mean to our brand going forward? Maybe we have some more conversations with our stakeholders and see if we can do more, see if we can scale it up. And so what you're doing is you're actually strategically, i.e., longer term, you're building some brand value that will reposition your business and your organization in a very, very different way for the future. So, as we round off, this is something that is your responsibility. It is your accountability. If you start to begin these conversations, this is kind of quite irresistible stuff, really, from a marketing perspective. It moves your brand, it moves your business beyond trading in just products and services, features and benefits, selling at a tactical level. It opens up a whole new range of conversations. So, marketing responsibility is something that we are going to see more and more of. Ethics, transparency, and honesty, doing wholesome good business. And this will be the stuff that the stakeholders in the future will be looking at from you. So, why not start today?